Seltzer Kings
podcasts.
In the military, veterans answer the call to serve. Now it's our turn. At Hire Heroes USA, they're changing lives, helping veterans and military spouses secure meaningful careers, all at no cost.
With over 100,000 success stories and counting nationwide, they're connecting skilled veterans with employers who recognize their true value. Visit hireheroesusa.org to access their services or to support their mission. What does an 18-year veteran of the tech industry and a 20-year veteran of the military have in common? More than you might think. Welcome, everyone, to the Second Act podcast, leveling up your life's journey.
You can't stop me. You don't got the power. Shut me down. That's not an option. I'm my biggest problem. You don't got the power. Shut me down. That's not an option. You can't stop me.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Second Act podcast with Michael and John. How's life today, John?
Man, Michael, it's pretty awesome. 4th of July holiday just ended, and how appropriate for our guest today. But my wife and I and my two boys, we went camping this weekend, which is something we love doing out here in Colorado, just to reconnect with nature and, not enjoy or have the ability to enjoy things that you don't normally get to enjoy, I guess, without the noise and without the hustle and bustle of everything and, stimulation all around you. It's just, man, hearing the wind and the trees and going out to the lake or the river, just watching the boys fish, man, it's one of my passions. So it reminded me, again, going into what we're going to talk about today, it reminds me on the way home, we've got everything that we needed over a 4-day period in the back of my Jeep. And I always remembered coming back from deployment, 9 months, and everything I have is in like 2 duffel bags. And it's just amazing what you can actually do without if you're pushed or you allow yourself to go without those things. And so driving home, I thought, man, I got a house filled with stuff that I don't even use. I wish I could just regulate myself to everything that's in my Jeep right now, and life would be so much easier. But alas, here we are in front of a computer and a microphone and headsets and all the other stuff. So it was a good weekend, though. How about yours?
Nice. Yeah, it was fantastic. I mean, you're describing the ultimate mindfulness, being present weekend with the family and the things that matter, pun intended. We'll get to that in a second. But it was fantastic. It was pretty low-key, cooked out on the grill, spent time outside in nature, and just being present with the family is always super important in life. And we have another winner this week in our Pay It Forward initiative that we have going on. So Rachel M., you are the winner for this week. If you've taken a break from our episodes or any podcast for that matter, and you're enjoying the summer months with family and friends outside, being present, just a quick reminder that if you visit our website or follow us, you'll see a way to enter a few details and be automatically entered to win an e-gift card, no strings attached. It's our version of paying for that cup of coffee or bag of groceries or meal for that person behind us in line.
Love it.
And we do that every week for folks who are listening or are following us on our channels. We believe that if the universe has blessed you with opportunities in life, you have a duty to help others who may not be as fortunate. Yeah. And today's guest is no stranger to paying it forward. In fact, he's helping millions of people live a more fulfilling and purposeful life. So with that said, I'd like to introduce Joshua Becker, the founder of Becoming Minimalist, a topic we've actually talked about quite a bit recently in some way, shape, or form with some of our guests. And Joshua's journey to minimalism started while he was standing in his garage with his son, who is tugging at him, asking him to play outside. And we'll get into more of that in a bit. But This pivotal moment led him on his 15-year entrepreneurial adventure, where he is now a globally recognized speaker, as well as a Wall Street Journal bestselling author on the topics of minimalism, intentional living, removing distractions, and generous living. He's been featured on CBS Evening News, The Today Show, The Boston Globe, USA Today, Washington Post, CNBC. He's been in a Netflix documentary called Minimalism and many other major media outlets. Joshua has built an incredible community and, even more importantly, an amazing family. He is a proud husband celebrating his 25th anniversary this year, so congrats, Joshua, on that. And father who now calls the Phoenix, Arizona area home. It's an honor to have you on, Joshua. Welcome to the show.
Yeah. Well, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for the invitation. This is wonderful. I'm excited you've talked about minimalism already and can't wait to learn what you have to teach me.
The camping trip wasn't planned in conjunction with the podcast. It just happened to work out that way. So, I'm fresh, ready to talk about minimalism. So
a funny story as you guys were sharing your stories. I grew up in the Midwest, South Dakota, North Dakota, Wisconsin, lived in Vermont for 6 years. We've been in Phoenix for 12 or 13 years now. And July 4th in Phoenix is entirely different than July 4th anywhere else in the world. It was 115 this past 4th of July weekend, and nice enough to go outside and watch some fireworks at the end of the day. But other than that, it's
a dry heat, though, isn't it? It's a dry heat.
It's very, very dry and very heat.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we are definitely not probably going to bring new perspectives on minimalism to you, Joshua, but I would say our guests recently have been minimalism adjacent, just really talking about, again, the things that matter in life, which is, I think, the title of one of your latest books. If anyone wants to check it out, I have a copy here at my house. But the topic of consumerism and the things that sort of end up owning us seem to be a topic that people are talking about more. And, the things that really matter, again, using your title, are around us. We can reach out to them. They're usually free. And it's a really good perspective to have as we sort of pursue the rest of our life, whether we're early, mid, or later stage in our life. And that's what we're looking forward to getting into today. Yeah. And with that said, I'd love for you to just sort of share, how you stumbled upon this particular topic.
So I discovered minimalism 16 years ago. If I were to give you a quick backstory to that Saturday morning when I was standing in my garage, I grew up very middle class, middle of the road. I always say we never missed a meal, but we were never eating at the nicest restaurants in town either. So pretty square in the middle class. All of my needs were met. And yet I had two streams of discontent that pretty constantly flowed through my life. I was always a little discontented with my money and my financial picture. And it seemed like no matter what amount of raise I got, so my wife and I had been married about 10 years at that time. We had 3 pretty significant pay increases. And every time I thought we would be able to get ahead financially, but we didn't, this more money came in and more money came out, and could never quite figure out what was happening to the money that I should have been getting ahead with. And also just like I wanted to be a generous person, but for some reason I never could find any margin to do so. Okay. The second stream of discontent in my life, I began to explain as I was growing discontented over the focus of my life's energy. And so that became apparent to me on Saturday morning, Memorial Day weekend, 2008. So we were living up in Vermont. We woke up this holiday weekend to do our spring cleaning on the Saturday, right? This is what we do on Saturdays. We run errands and fix stuff around the house and do things. I offered to clean up the garage after the long winter. My son Salem was 5 years old at the time, and just like a father would, I thought he would love the idea of cleaning out the garage with his dad. But He lasted about 30 seconds and went into the backyard. I'm working on the garage. One thing leads to another. Hours later, I'm still organizing and pulling things out and hosing everything down. My neighbor, her name is June. She's in her 80s. She's doing all of her yard work while this is happening on my side of the hedge with my son asking me to play and me working on the garage. We strike up a conversation. I complain a little bit about how long this project had taken. And she introduces me to minimalism with a pretty simple sentence. She says, that's why my daughter is a minimalist. She keeps telling me I don't need to own all this stuff. And I looked at my driveway, and here's this pile of dirty, dusty things I pulled out of the garage to clean and sort. And I would have said at that time, just like anyone else, that my possessions are not making me happy. I'm not looking for happiness in the things that I buy. But out of the corner of my eye, I saw my son swinging alone on the swing set in the backyard where he had been all morning long. And suddenly I realized not only were my possessions not making me happy, but all of my possessions were actually taking me away from the very thing that did bring me happiness in life. And not just happiness, but meaning and purpose and significance and fulfillment and joy. It's one thing to say that our possessions aren't making us happy, but it's something very different the moment we realize that maybe they're actually taking us away from happiness. And I think that is the light bulb moment when minimalism begins to make sense. And so that started our journey that morning.
Wow.
Amazing. I think when you share both sides of that equation, Joshua, I think it really helps create the holistic picture of what's going on. So these things, you mentioned the two sort of areas of discontentment, the money that you were getting and increasingly more so, and then the things that it bought, and then how that sort of led to that discontentment about not spending time on the things that really matter in your life. Unfortunately, people get to a point where it's too late to have that realization. And I think what you've been able to do through your writing and speaking and message to the world around all of this, I know it's impacted, I've shared with you offline, it's impacted our household and why this particular episode is so special to me. But the lives of so many others who are maybe having that epiphany or wake-up call sooner than they maybe would, and how it's impacting them in such a positive way.
Well, I don't know if it's ever too late. Certainly, I think the earlier the better we make this realization, right? The less money we waste, and the less time we waste, and even the less years we waste, or the opportunity to, provide this example for our kids. Certainly, I think the earlier the better we make the discovery. But different people at different times, and we learn different things about life at different times, and the right message hits us at just the right time when we're ready to hear it. And so I literally through the blog Becoming Minimalist, my desire is, the way I explain it is, I want to play my neighbor's role in as many people's lives as possible. Like I just want to introduce this idea to other people, and certainly they get to do whatever they want with it. But if we can at least think it through and maybe make a connection between the hurried, rushed, tired lives that we're living that aren't making us happy, and maybe how the possessions we've accumulated and the lies we've been told our entire lives can be rearranged and reshuffled and reoriented towards a better future.
Joshua, we have a rule in the military that if you're speaking and you use an acronym, you have to explain that acronym before you go further down the road so that people are all on the same page. And I just want to do that for our audience so that everyone knows exactly what you're talking about, and myself included. Because as I alluded, camping and deploying, there's ways to reduce the things in your life. Those are some, to some people, two extremes. But just break down what is minimalism for those who are new to this term?
Yeah, great. The whole time you were talking, I'm thinking, what acronym did I use? What acronym did I? No, I got it. No, I figured out pretty clearly where you're going. And it is like, this is super helpful. So minimalism, I think on its surface, is about owning fewer possessions, owning just what you need. And that is true. But there's like a deeper, richer understanding to it. That the goal of minimalism isn't just to own the least amount of things that I can possibly own. The goal of minimalism is to live a more passionate, focused life on things that actually bring us joy and meaning and fulfillment. So the way I define minimalism is the intentional promotion of the things we most value in life by removing anything that distracts us from it. I'll say it again because I love it so much. Minimalism is the intentional promotion of the things we most value in life by removing anything that distracts us from those values and those pursuits. Passions, values are going to look different from one person to another, thankfully so. In the same way, minimalism is always going to look different from one person to another. If you have 6 kids, or if you're a single guy in your 20s, like the things you need to own are going to look very different. If you own a farm out in the country, it's going to look very different than if you own a studio apartment where you have public transportation. If you are a writer or a dentist or a mechanic or a farmer or a teacher or an accountant, like all of those things are going to require you to own different items and different tools. But the idea of minimalism is, what do I need to own so that I can fulfill my purpose and goals in life? And what is all the things that I've just accumulated that are actually keeping me from living my best life going forward? Those are the things I want to get rid of. And certainly possessions are like the first thing that I talk about because that's how I was introduced to it. But it can apply to, you know, the habits we have in our lives, the calendar we keep, even the relationships we have, the way we interact online. Like there's a lot of different ways that can be applied, which I think it makes the definition so rich and helpful.
That's great. I appreciate you breaking that down for me and for others. I'm interested, you have just a very surface case study of somebody that comes to you and says, you know what, Joshua, I got it. Minimalism, I think I understand. What does that look like logically? What does that look like in my life? And how do you go about maybe coaching them or helping them embrace minimalism in their everyday life?
Well, I think that the easiest, most visible way to get started is by removing possessions. And so my counsel, my advice would be, go start in like a room that you spend time in, your living room, your bedroom, maybe even your car sometimes is where I send people. And I say, just take everything out of that room that you don't need for that room to function and to stay focused on you know, what matters most. And sure, if you have a living room, like the idea is this is where we spend time as a family and we want to interact with one another. But what happens is, and I learned this pretty early on as we began getting rid of our possessions in our own home. I remember making a blog post. I started the blog like the Monday after the Saturday. And it was just my online diary of what I was getting rid of and what we were learning. And I remember posting one time, I said, this process is far more emotionally and mentally taxing than I ever thought it would be. I imagine physically it's going to be difficult just to hauling everything out of the house, but like just the thought and the strategy and the way your heart kind of tugs at different things, like this is as much internal as it is external. And a commenter commented on the post, and he simply said, it seems to me that minimalism would force questions of values upon you. And 15 years later, I still use that quote because it's true. Like, even if you try to declutter one room, much less 2 or 3 or 4, you're going to be forced pretty quick to wrestle with, okay, what is important to me? What do I want to accomplish with my life? What are my values that I want to promote? And so even the process of getting rid of possessions begins to force some of those questions upon you, which I think helps you begin to define what is important, where has my life fallen out of alignment with my values, and how can I bring it back in to alignment?
That's good.
Yeah, and as you mentioned earlier, it's not a one-size-fits-all, Joshua, because you said there's people who are early career, late career. Some people have families. Some people are couples with no kids. Some people are single. And so what it means to that person is different. But the way that you just sort of framed it in terms of value is, I think, probably the most helpful perspective. And we've gone through iterations of that in our household. I will tell you, having a young child in my house and the things that are important to him versus the parents. I mean, we want to save all his artwork and his creations and things. But if we have all those things for every moment of his life, we might be able to fill the house at some point with that stuff. And thankfully, the digital world has been able to create clever ways of preserving some of those things in a digital format that maybe reduces the form in which that piece of art or life exists, so that we can not have it overwhelm us. And from a stress perspective, your teachings, the things that you share about your journey, I think there's a wellness factor that I don't know if you have data related to your journey of minimalism and people's overall well-being and the correlation or even causation of that. But I think it's just sort of fascinating to think about it, because when you're exchanging things for experiences with the people that matter to you most, it's really, again, coming back to your message around value, it's really eye-opening.
Yeah, you can find a lot of interesting research, some thoughts that come to my head, although I probably can't cite study and date and university at this point in time, but you can Google any of this stuff. A lot of how clutter negatively affects us. So you can find a lot of studies on the negative nature of clutter. You can find a lot of studies on how experiences bring us greater joy than possessions. And interestingly, before the experience, during the experience, and after the experience, we find joy in all 3 parts that exceed all the possessions that we could buy. I was the first website dedicated entirely to minimalism. There are other people talking about it 15 years ago, but nothing quite dedicated to the movement, and a large growth since then. And so you can find studies now, specific studies on how minimalism brings about positive influences and positive effects in our lives. Certainly there's tons of data about, how much money makes us happy, and if, money is really bringing us as much happiness as we think it will. But one of the things I do when I speak is I always just ask a question of the audience. I'll just say, hey, turn to your neighbor and answer this question. If you were to own less stuff, in what specific ways would your life improve? And what's interesting is that no one needs a study to start making a list of all the ways my life would look better if I owned less stuff. I would have more money. I would have more time. There would be less stress, fewer decisions that I need to make. There'd be more freedom. My house would finally be big enough and I wouldn't need to upgrade my house. I'd be a better example for my kids, live a better life for the environment, more gratitude and generosity and contentment. And we found all of those things to be true of our lives. And what I think it just discovered is that we can answer that question, and anyone who's listening, like, you can come up with specific ways that your life would improve by owning less stuff. We just live in a world where we're never asked that question, and we're just told over and over again, 5,000 times a day, advertisements tell us our life will improve if we buy what they're selling. And so that is the message that we hear in our culture and in our society over and over and over again. And we just very subtly, unintentionally begin to believe it. And before we know it, our homes are 3 times the size that they were 50 years ago. 11% of us rent off-site storage. We own more things today than at any point in human history. And I think it's time to just take a step back and ask, is this really leading us to the life that we dreamed it would?
Joshua, if I could, I would stand up and give you an ovation, because in the 20 years of being in the military and moving 13 times in those 20 years, we sit every time that we pack up to move and we fill trash bags full of stuff. And I started recognizing that the more we moved, we actually could stay more streamlined. And it wasn't until we got to some place and we were there for 3 years, 4 years, that we started accumulating again. But when we were constantly on the move, we kept our stuff to be, what we needed. And we have a rule within our household when we're cleaning up: if we haven't touched, seen, or used it within 3 years, it's gone. And because I came from a home that was bigger than it should have been, and we had the offsite storage, and it was packed, and I kept seeing these bills coming in on a monthly basis from this storage facility that we're using, and I could not believe how much money my family spent, my parents spent, storing stuff that they still haven't used, 22 years later. Now, I'll be careful, because some of that stuff is my old baseball cards and some old G.I. Joe toys that I'm going to give my kids. But it just is unbelievable how much time and money go into things that we don't truly need. And you're hitting the nail right on the head. And I'm interested, Michael read off all the publications that you've been part of, the shows that you have appeared on. What is it that resonates with people the most when you talk about minimalism?
That was a good question. I think that it depends on who's listening, and I mean that legitimately. And I try to when people ask me about, hey, I want to own less, but my husband wants nothing to do with it, or I'm in for minimalism, but my wife wants nothing to do with it. One of the pieces of counsel that I give is, hey, what's going to attract one person to minimalism might be different than what attracts someone else.
Sure.
If you are the primary homemaker or housekeeper in the home, like if you're the one that does all the cooking and does the cleaning and like carries that burden, then the idea of, hey, if I owned less stuff, I would have to waste less time cleaning and organizing and managing, then that makes great sense to somebody. But if that's not you in the relationship, then, well, I don't even know how much time goes into taking care of the house, because that's not something I do. But for you, maybe the idea of, hey, getting ahead financially, or when you are home, you get to spend time with your kids, or you're the one that likes to travel, or your job pays well, but you hate it and you just can't see a way out. Suddenly, maybe the light bulb turns on, and hey, if I wasn't buying so much stuff, if I was just owning and buying what we actually needed, then I wouldn't need to stay in this job that I don't like. I could go find something more meaningful that pays less, and my life would improve in every way. Some people want to downsize. Some people want to retire early. And So it's a tough way for me to answer. I always hit the minimalism saves us money, time, energy, and focus. Those are the four things that I hit that I think tends to resonate with the most amount of people.
Good.
You have a section in your book that talks about the dark side of technology, and the evolution of consumerism started with the ability to make you want something through, walking down the street and seeing something in a store window, to being heard on the radio, to being seen on the TV, to see in the movies. And now we have these amazing smart devices in our pockets 24/7, where we're connected with people we know and don't know, along with countless number of advertisers telling us about the things that we think we need. And they never talk about, hey, you should really, unplug, spend some time with your family, go outside, be present. I mean, I can't think of a single instance where there's any encouragement of that, except through maybe folks like yourself or a handful of books that talk on that topic or something similar. And it's very telling as to the incentives and motivations of, the consumer-based world that we live in. And I get that, these companies, they produce jobs and create income for people. But again, coming back to like what's valuable in your life, and for me, it's definitely around time, being able to have control over time, and how I spend that time is the most important thing to me, because time, at least in my mind, equals freedom. You probably have impacted my life in more ways than you can imagine, Joshua, because you've been a part of our household indirectly since over a decade ago with some of the stuff that you've shared with the world. So thank you.
Yeah, I was going to mention, it's not just we carry advertisements in our pocket, and, we spend hours scrolling through mostly advertisements for the few photos from friends nowadays. Yeah. But in many ways, probably in almost every way, like they know us better than we know ourselves now.
Right.
Like they know our interests. They know what triggers us. They know what time of day we're shopping. They know what type of ad resonates with us. And so it's not just a billboard on the side of the street or a commercial in the middle of a soap opera or late night show. It's a specific tailored advertisement that hits us in our weakest time and in our weakest area. And it's helpful to know that. It's helpful to know that we're not nearly as immune to commercials as we think we are. Like they get us and they sell us. And one of the things that I learned through this process, we took like 2 boxes of things to Goodwill, like 2 van loads of things to Goodwill, and it felt great. And like a third and a fourth. And like by about my 3rd trip to Goodwill, I started to ask myself, like, how did this happen? Like why did I have 3 van loads of things in my home that I didn't need to own? It's actually a pretty rich question. Why do we buy things that we don't need? Why do we waste our money on things that we don't need to have? And you start like uncovering some of the really unhealthy motivations that compel our behavior. If it's, discontent or jealousy or selfishness, greed, wanting to prove our worth and prove our value or show off how much we get paid, just, the life that we learned from our parents or the life that we rebelled against from our parents. Like there's a lot of internal work, I think, that needs to be done to overcome some of that advertising and marketing that we hear constantly day in and day out.
Joshua, along those lines of consumerism, I want to go back to something you brought up earlier in the episode, and you talked about your discontent or inability to keep up despite you receiving more money and more raises. Tell me about that experience. I mean, what was keeping you bound to where you were at and not able to get ahead with the raises you were receiving?
Well, I'm not sure what the stats are today. Regardless of the administration, it tends to hang out between 75 to 80% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. That's pretty much been the stat since I started reporting it 15 years ago. And every party out of power blames it on the current party in power as to why that's the case. But it's not about politics. It just seems to be human nature that fed into, consumerism and marketing, that when more money comes in, we just tend to buy more stuff. We upgrade the home, we upgrade the car, we upgrade the television, the furniture, we buy more clothes, we buy more purses, we buy more tools, we take more extravagant vacations. Like as money comes in, we just tend to spend more and more until we notice it and we take a step back and we say, what am I doing and why is this happening? And just obviously needs to be mentioned. Certainly there are some people where the income is just enough to get by, but it is not 75 to 80% of Americans that need to be living paycheck to paycheck. It's just the society that we're in, the culture that we're in, and some of those, unhealthy motivations that compel us to spend more and more than we need to. That's the way I see it anyway.
Yeah.
That was true in my life. Like I was living paycheck to paycheck, and I had 3 van loads of things in my house that I didn't need. And I was like, well, I didn't need to be struggling financially. I could have had a nice little savings account if I just went to bought all this stuff that I didn't need.
Well, we talked to so many people on the show that mention as they get, they start out post-college or post-high school and they get into this career and they get promoted and they get a better title and a better office and then they upgrade their car, just like you're saying, until one day they recognize they're so far away from where they thought they would be, whether it was emotionally or, spiritually or just what they're focused on. And they just have this snap moment where they decide to, shift entirely. And so that's kind of what I was wondering is what was kind of building up, was it the boat that sprung a leak that you're like, man, we're done with this. We're not keeping this thing going anymore. Or the multiple cars in your driveway or, because it's always, it's something different, as you alluded to before, something different for everybody. But it's so interesting that this is your specialty and you're helping people recognize it before that split moment and before that happens.
And I think understanding your history and why you see things the way you do can be so helpful. And that thought just came to me as you were listing off those illustrations. I talked to a young man one time. I've never been attracted to cars. Like I've never been a car guy. Yeah. And so I wrote about cars in my first book, The More of Less, and just it's a huge expense for a lot of people. And I'm like, I just need to talk to like a car guy about what is the appeal and why are people spending so much money on something that could get me in the same spot. And his story was he was in the medical profession, and again, college, came out with a lot of debt, young family, didn't have a lot of money, just starting out. And he said, but I walked outside the hospital every day and my car was 12 years older, $50,000 worth less than every other car in the parking lot. Everyone else doing the same job as me was driving a really nice car. And he said, ultimately that got to me and I ended up buying a really nice car. I had another friend who same career as his father. His father was always a pretty flashy spender. And he said, I could not impress my father unless I was buying the things that he was buying. And he said, every time my father would would come visit us and come visit the grandkids, he would ask, why are you driving that old car? Why don't you have a bigger screen television? And he said it just became like too much. Like at some point, I've got to show my father that I'm making it and I'm successful. And so I think a lot of different things lead us up to spending money the way we do, and understanding that can be so helpful and incredibly difficult and painful to learn about ourselves. But we come out so much better on the other side when we do.
That's really interesting. The perspective of living up to your parents' expectations in terms of what success are, or leaving the building, walking out to the parking lot, and the symbols of success are fancy cars. Maybe you came from childhood economic status where you were poor, and now you went to college, you got a degree, you're making money, and that success is defined by that thing. You're right. I mean, 100% right. It really depends on the person. And coming back to your comments around technology and advertisers who know maybe more about us than we know about ourselves, oftentimes, is like, if we look at a couple use cases, if I've had a really stressful day at work and I want to decompress, I'm going to scroll Instagram for half an hour, and they're feeding you things that they have high confidence they know you'll like, and some of those are calls to action to purchase something. Or maybe I just had a big fight with my girlfriend or my wife, or one of my kids, or something happened, and you're in a vulnerable state. And the science is, maybe by buying something, you get that dopamine hit that gets you all excited temporarily for that thing, but then that weans off, and now you're stuck with the thing, and you're kind of back to where you were. So it all sort of comes together in a really interesting way, and it's just really awesome what you're doing with minimalism, Joshua.
I'll mention two things based on what you said. Number one, like, it is so much easier today to buy things than it was before. Like it used to be, I had to get in the car and drive to the mall, or I had to, send in a letter from the JCPenney catalog. Like I had to go somewhere and do something. And now literally it's like one click of a button and it can show up overnight, and I can have it by the following morning. And just the accessibility of things really makes this increasingly difficult. I want to go back to what you said about success, because really, to me, like, the further you go down this road, you really begin to discover that minimalism is about redefining success differently than the world tends to define it. And that can be very difficult. I go out of my way to mention that minimalism isn't about being lazy. Minimalism, well, some people can use minimalism to be lazy and to check out of life and go sit on a beach for the rest of their lives. And some people can do that if they want to, right? Anyone can value whatever they want to value. But for me, that has never been the goal or the purpose. I want to live a more passionate, a more ambitious life. I want to work harder than I ever did before. I just want to be working with the right motivation, and I want to be working for the right things. And minimalism forces me to say, okay, I'm not going to define success by how many square feet are in my home, or the price of my car, or what designer clothing I'm wearing. I'm going to define success very differently. And for me, we started a nonprofit back in 2015, and like, I want to work for the sake of helping people and serving people. To me, my motivation for work is love. I want to love people by showing up in the world, doing the best that I can, offering the best good that I can to help as many people as I possibly can. And if money comes in from that, which typically happens, right, when we serve others and help others, we tend to get compensated for it. I just want to use the financial gains, not chasing things that are going to distract me from work, but plugging it right back into those things that bring me meaning and fulfillment so I can get to the end of my life and have as fewer regrets as possible.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, we're hardwired from infancy that success is a financial metric or a status of something, the material stuff. And I mean, that's a difficult rewiring exercise to go through. But if you're able to do it through learning and understanding, a lot around the stuff that you are sharing with the world, you come out of the other side in a much more sort of content, peaceful sort of place, I think. I at least I'm speaking from my own personal experience.
Yeah. I would agree with that, Michael. And I was reminded of that coming back home last night from our camping trip. My wife and I were laying in bed and she was showing me pictures of a friend of hers that's in Greece, went on a cruise, enjoying some nice meals and experiences. And I said to her, right after we got home and unpacked, so I'm sorry we're not doing stuff like that. And she looked at me and she said, John, you should know this by now, but remember, I would much rather spend time outdoors, camping in the woods than I would on a lavish cruise or a trip eating fancy meals. She goes, hot dogs and hamburgers off the grill, looking at, a forest is much more enjoyable and, soothing than anything else. And I think it just reminded me about the conversations we need to have with our spouses and significant others about what makes them tick. Because, as Joshua alluded earlier, it may not be a bunch of clothes, purses. It may not even be the experiences. It may just be something simple. It may be a camping trip or time spent together or, time spent with the kids when you could be, cleaning out the garage. Those memories will last much longer than some things that we can purchase, even if some of those purchasable things are experiences. So I appreciate the reminder from my wife, and now we're going to go camping again this next weekend because we can do it, and it's pretty cheap and it's easy to load up the car and go and disconnect. So sometimes those conversations and those reminders are good to dust off as well and bring us back into what we know is our true joy.
I had a lady share a story with me one time. They were going through their home, minimizing and getting rid of stuff, and they eventually got to the garage, and they had all these shelves and shelves of camping gear. And she said my husband just stopped and was just staring at the shelves. And she said, what are you thinking about? And he said, I bought all of this camping gear so that I could go camping with our boys. But now my boys have moved out, and I can count on maybe one hand how many times we actually went camping. And he said, I was so busy working to make the money to go buy the camping stuff that we could never find time as a family to actually go spend time camping. And she continues the story, and she said, so we took all of the camping gear. We took it to my middle son, who was always the one who loved the outdoors the most. He had just gotten married. And we took it all to his house, and she said, it was the first time I ever saw my husband cry.
Yeah.
He gave the camping gear to our son, and he said, I don't want you to make the same mistake that I made. And you can constantly chase more money and more stuff, or you can be intentional and deliberate and make time today for the things that matter. And so when you mentioned your camping story and that you're going out again next weekend, it was just made me so happy to hear that you're doing that with your kids and you're being that type of father. So thank you for doing that and for investing in your kids.
Well, and I appreciate my wife letting me know and reminding me that it's not what we're looking at from other people. that it's the experience that we just came home from. It's the experience right outside our back porch that makes her smile and fills her cup. And the same for my boys. And that was just a powerful reminder, because I immediately shifted into what we didn't have or what we weren't experiencing. And that was part of my point, was just sometimes having those conversations with those around us and my boys. What do you guys want to do? What what do you want to do? Not what do you want to get, right? Or where do you want to go? But what can we do together is an important question to ask.
Yeah, and kids are great truth tellers in terms of what's important and valuable in life.
Yeah.
And if you're a road warrior business person, and you might ask them, what more could we do as parents, or what can I do better as a dad? They might tell you, I wish you were home more.
Yeah.
And it's an amazing eye opener. And if you sort of take that at face value, and you, again, rewire yourself in some way and your life in some way to be able to honor that, that's a pretty special thing.
Yep.
Yeah, there's great value in work, and we're all, wired to do something differently, and we all need to be doing different jobs and different responsibilities, and doing them to the best of our abilities, and sometimes that takes us away from home, and sometimes it doesn't. I wrote an article one time, a bit controversial, I think. The title was something like, maybe your family doesn't want as much money as you think they do. And that was the whole point. Like, you're out there hustling because you want to make, certain level of money and provide a certain status for your family. At least you say your family, it might just be you as much as anyone else. And, maybe your family is like, what, I'd be happy with less money if I could see you more often. And there was no, formula, specific answer of what that was going to be in any person's life. I just wanted to spark the thought and maybe raise the question in someone's mind at some point.
Well, Joshua, we're coming near the end of our time here, and you've shared a lot already with our audience about the minimalism journey and important things to consider. If there's any sort of final parting advice or wisdom you'd like to share, now would be a great moment to do that, and then we can sort of wrap things up.
I'll just end with one thought. You have no idea how much your life will change when you intentionally decide to own less stuff. The surface, more money, more time, more energy, more focus, like all that surface stuff, but the freedom that it brings, like when you can free yourself up from wanting to buy everything or own everything, when you begin to free up money that you would have spent on something else, or time that you would have spent cleaning or caring for your things, it's the life change that happened in my life, the life change that I've seen in other people's lives is, I can guarantee, more significant and bigger than you imagine. If you have any of that little discontent of, man, am I chasing after the right things? I can guarantee that if you purposefully decide to own less, you'll be shocked at how much life change is available to you. I'll end with that.
That's awesome.
It's so good, Joshua. And just a great reminder for me, of what's important. My dad used to say, he learned an acronym from Lou Holtz, the famous football coach, but it was WIN, and it stood for what's important now. And just you reminding me through this conversation of what's important now with, a son that's 12 and a son that's 8, what's important to them right now. It's not the stuff that we have in the garage or the stuff that we can purchase online that we think is going to make our lives more exciting and more interesting, but it's the time that we spend with them right now when they're 8 and 12 and wanting to have those experiences. So thank you so much for that reminder, and thanks for coming on the show and sharing your story with our audience. for the listeners who are interested in learning more about you or linking up with you, what's a great way to connect with you and what you're doing?
The best place always is becomingminimalist.com. That's home base for me, and do a lot of different things, and I've written a few different books and have a course that people can use, but everything flows through becomingminimalist.com. So thanks so much.
We'll be sure to put that in our show notes, the link in your show notes. And man, just again, from me to you, thank you again for coming on. And I appreciate it a lot.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much, Joshua. You know offline how much this episode is going to mean to me and my family, and it's been an honor sharing this hour with you. Thanks so much.
All right.
See ya.
We'll see you guys later. Thanks.
The Second Act with Michael and John stars Michael Newborn and John Ballinger. The podcast is produced by Seltzer Kings. For more information on the show, check out michaelandjohn.com, or if you'd like to get involved in the conversation, give the guys a shout on their socials at The Second Act with Michael and John on most platforms. Thanks for listening.
Seltzer Kings
Podcasts.